Last year, the Urban Development Corporation announced that it was actively working to create a master plan for the development of the Government Circle project, which will see lands within the National Heroes Circle and surrounding environs transformed into a state-of-the-art government complex featuring several ministry buildings, commercial and residential developments, a museum, and a brand new parliament building. That parliament building is the reason we are here today, as the UDC has announced that they would allow the public to dictate the design of the new parliament building through a design competition. They are now ready for the competition to gear up, so reps from the UDC are here to share details about it with us. To my right is Mr. Leighton Whyte. He's Senior Project Manager at the UDC. And to his right is Mr. Gill, who's an international architectural expert and happens also to be the patron for the UDC's Houses of Parliament Design Competition. Welcome to both of you, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, wonderful. So, Leighton, I'm going to start with you. Can you just give us the rationale behind the Houses of Parliament Design Competition?
Well, the design competition is for a new Houses of Parliament.
Mm-hmm.
As we know, the existing facility is temporary and has been so for many
years. Yeah.
The Houses of Parliament that we now have was actually moved a few times to where it is now. It used to be at Hibbert House.
You just taught me something new.
Yeah, Hibbert House was actually right across the street from it. And before that it was actually in Spanish Town.
Yes, well, yes.
Right. So we have looked at this project for many years now as Jamaicans, and now it's coming to fruition.
All right.
We, as you rightly said, we want to engage the public and have our local architects be a part of this process. Hence the design competition.
All right, and talk to us about engaging Mr. Gill here and having him be the patron of the competition. How did that come about, and what's the rationale behind that?
Well, the structure of the organization for the competition dictates that we have someone at the helm leading the entire process.
Okay.
And the call went out, and Mr. Gill, Architect Gill, he gladly accepted to join our team. His resume is wide and extensive. I'd allow him to talk about that if he so desires.
Yeah, we want him to share about it. It would be good for us to get a little more.
But from our standpoint, he is more than qualified to help us to make sure the competition withstands international scrutiny.
Okay.
He, as patron, is expected to guide our process to ensure that we move and organize according to international standards.
Mr. Gill, let me ask you, what made you feel inclined to be a part of the process from where you were? What prompted you to lend your expertise in this kind of way?
Well, a couple of reasons. First, I think that when you get a call that asks you to be a part of making history, those don't happen every day. So, this project is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for the architects and planners of this country. I'm not here on a regular basis. I'm in Chicago. So to be asked to be a patron for this competition is, for me, a great honor. It's something that's near and dear to my heart. Jamaica is my home, very, very important to me. And to be asked to help guide this was a pretty big responsibility and a very important one from my position. So it was easy for me to say yes to that.
Okay. All right. So Leighton, talk to me some more about what stage you're at in terms of the rules, regulations, and that kind of thing. How persons can get information on that end for the competition.
All right. Well, I'm happy to say that the competition launches on the 17th of May.
Okay. 17th of May, ladies and gentlemen.
17th of May, which is actually a few days from now. Thursday coming, to be exact. And that launch will give all the details in terms of rules and regulations, what's expected of each entrant, and how we expect to go forward.
Okay.
Just to be, in summary, just to say that the competition is about 9 months long.
Okay.
So we expect to start on May 17th. And from then, we would have 2 stages. The first stage, we'd invite the entrance to submit conceptual design.
Mm-hmm.
So they would not go into much detail, but they would just look at the site and what affects and impacts the possible proposal that they'll be coming up with.
A quick question, well, as you mentioned, the site is where would be the site that is being recommended?
All right. The site is actually within the National Heroes Park.
Right. Is that a particular section? I mean, north, south, west, east, that kind of thing. Have you identified that physical site yet, or is it still being discussed?
The consideration is that it should be central to the park.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So the design should be iconic. It should make a statement for the people of Jamaica.
Mm-hmm.
It should be one in which it is something that can be fitting
All right.
of a permanent home for a seat of government.
All right. Let me bring in Mr. Gill. Coming to you, what, in your opinion, reflects that kind of iconic representation of a from an architectural standpoint? What reflects that from where you sit?
Well, I think
I don't necessarily want to give persons ideas ahead of time.
No,
I try to narrow their focus, but at the same time, what makes a building look good?
We'll stay pretty generic on it, but I think that the building needs to have a certain scale and elegance and quality to it, and I don't mean that just physically. I mean that in terms of its thought process. So, we're looking for an opportunity where there's a deep meaning to the positioning of the building. Having a deep relationship to the public open space and the kind of landscaping greenery that's critical to the project itself. I think from a contextual standpoint, we're looking for a project that is related to Kingston and Jamaica as a whole.
Okay.
And then we're looking for a highly sustainable building project. So we want something that's of the 21st century. We don't necessarily want to look back. We want to look forward. And we leave it up to the architects and the planners to show us
how they interpret that.
Absolutely. I think this is a fantastic chance, as I said before. And sometimes I wonder if I made the right choice, because in another way, I'd rather be on the other side of the table.
Okay.
But I think I'm where I belong, and I look forward to seeing all the competition entries. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
All right. Leighton, talk to me about who's eligible to enter this competition. I know when the launch goes off, we'll get a lot of this information, but for those persons who might be watching now and just might be interested and wondering whether or not they might be sitting somewhere, I don't know, in London or Brazil or something like that, and might feel like they want to make an impact like Mr. Gill. And
of course.
Yeah.
It's a national competition, first of all. So it is open to registered, licensed architects of Jamaica.
Okay.
I say that in starting, because that's important. But it's open to teams. And these teams we expect to have persons of various backgrounds.
Okay.
Not just professionally, but persons who may be in the diaspora, persons who may be overseas.
Okay.
But the person on record must be a registered licensed architect of Jamaica.
Okay, so it's
because
very possible.
That's who we're gearing towards.
All right.
You know.
So does that mean it's possible, for example, for somebody overseas to partner with somebody who's here?
Yes.
And then create that kind of design?
Absolutely. We would prefer to have the team predominantly Jamaican, however.
Okay.
So if you're overseas, not registered here in Jamaica, and you'd want to participate, we expect that you would reach out to a locally registered architect, and you would work out a team structure with that person and their firm, so that the Jamaican-ness is still maintained.
Okay. You're here in Studio 58A at the Jamaica Information Service. We're live on Facebook discussing the government circle project, specifically the House of Parliament design competition. And as you just heard, Leighton just mentioned that they'd prefer that the teams or the groups who come together to design this project are predominantly Jamaican, which is right, because we want this to reflect us as a people and stand out for us as a people. Now, let me move on to another question I have here, which is timeline for selection of, and you mentioned it's a 9-month process and so on, but can you just go over again for those who may have missed it, the timeline for the launch competition and moving through the judging process, and then from there, I suppose, construction, that kind of thing?
All right. So the details, as I said, will be made available on May 17th. We actually have put together a website. That will be made available on the 17th as well. But just to give an overview, we expect to have a two-stage process. The first stage, we expect to have the conceptual designs within a month or so. And then we have the judges, who are about 7 judges in total.
Okay.
These judges are actually persons from the various sectors, construction sector here in Jamaica. So we'll be having a planner, an architect, head of school, head of the engineering professional body as well, a historian, architectural historian, a representative from the UDC. So it's a vast cross-section of highly qualified persons.
All right. I mean, if you haven't thought of it yet, I'm just probably going to recommend my 2 cents. We get some youth infused into that, because the youth are it's their building, and they might want to see something that looks, I guess, more modern, or something that kind of reflects that youthful element. I don't know.
I can say that the majority of these persons are youth.
Okay.
As well. I mean, they may not be on a.
Don't let the gray hair fool you.
We're
still youthful.
We're still youthful.
We're not going to look for anything that we think is archaic in the sense of the imagination, and that's exactly what we want. I think you're right on the money. We do want something that speaks to the spirit of the future of this country, while still being of the people and for the people of this country. So I think that's when we talk about international standards and we talk about the quality of architecture, we expect us to rise above everything else that we have here currently.
All right, Leighton, talk to me about, because you mentioned that persons should be registered with our local architectural association, our body. How is the partnership with that and working with them to ensure that this process comes to a nice conclusion?
Well, we have invited the local architectural community.
Right.
It's called the JIA, Jamaica Institute of Architects, to be a part of the process. They have invited to be a part of the jury. And the jury not only just looks at entries as they come. The jury is expected to be a part of planning the entire competition. So the jury to date have met a few times, and they've reviewed our documentation, they've reviewed our website, and they are, for the most part, in agreement with where we are so far. So the jury, as well as our patron, Gill, have been a part of the entire process from day one, to ensure that what we have put together for our Jamaican people can hold up to any scrutiny.
All right, now
I haven't gone through the full 9-month process yet, because you asked the question. I went into the jury and kind of
all right,
I want to finish that answer first. So the first section, which is the first stage, is anonymous. So we expect that persons would submit their entries, and we would shield their personal information. The jury would not know who these persons are. So
it's a blind competition, essentially.
Assigned a number, and their number would be on their proposal. When we get to the top 5 out of all the entries, those top 5 will be awarded a tidy sum, and then they will be asked to move forward to the second stage. And the second stage now, we would have more details from our entrance. The details would include their vision for the parliament, costing, rough order of magnitude. More details into how the thing will actually be structured and built. And once that's complete, and then we have awarded the first 3, first, second, and third, then we move towards engaging that person, towards being a part of the construction process. So it's important to know that this is not an ideas competition where anyone can submit what they think and their ideas for the parliament. It's a project competition where we intend to move forward with a person through this process to actually build the building.
All right, so that means anybody who might have a conceptual idea, you need to link up with a registered architect and bring that idea on paper into an actual project document that can move forward through the process. All right, so there's a concern that persons have that the introduction of the Parliament building might be taking away from the green spaces and you know, kind of preventing persons from enjoying the beauty that is Heroes Park. I'm pretty sure that the UDC is making sure that it works in harmony with the green environment in the area. Talk to me about the consideration that's being given towards that.
I would love for Architect Gill to take that question.
All right.
I will say a word, but I want Architect Gill to.
Over to you, Mr.
Because I know his vision. Yes.
Short answer is yes. I mean, I think that we had a lot of discussions about this, and we've seen a lot of comments about this. And I would tell you that all the comments that I've seen from outside the UDC are very consistent with the comments that we've had inside the UDC.
Okay.
So I have a real sense of comfort that knowing that the kind of professional public are protecting that green open space for the people of Jamaica. And I can tell you that the same is true from what I've seen from the UDC, from the Prime Minister and everyone on down. I think it's very important that the solution be creative. There are demands on a building like that, but that does not mean that these public, governmental, cultural programs can't or shouldn't coexist in a single space. In fact, you know, I wonder, and I ask the question all the time, that if this is really for the people, and you want to elevate that status of the people to a national position and a global position, can this project be the vehicle to do that? Can you put the Jamaican people on a stage where the building or buildings that are in the park, which I would tell you from my calculations take up a very, very, very small portion of that space, to the point where it's almost, you have to be almost careful it doesn't become too small in order to hold its presence within this 50-acre park. But I think that there's a real creative opportunity here for the buildings to support the public life of this park and to bring life to a space on a regular basis and to have it mutually consistent and conducive to the activities of recreational space and public green space. I think it'd be fantastic.
All right.
To add to that statement as well, which we've all agreed at the UDC, we anticipate this space to be just as it has been mandated by law, which is to be a public green space for recreation, etc. But we also envision that the Parliament building complex structure space is one which can be more interactive with the public.
Okay.
The idea that a Parliament is supposed to be over there.
Yeah, I think that's
it's behind a huge fence and security and all that kind of stuff, and we're over here. Is archaic. What we're looking at is a structure, a space that the people can go up, they can have lunch, they can go to a museum, a cafe, and interact with the organization of the Parliament. What happens now, because we've had site visits to the existing Parliament, and we looked at what obtains now. Mind you, it's a temporary space, and the people there will tell you that they're way past its usefulness in terms of the space requirements. But when we looked at it and we understood what now obtains, the cafe that's there actually is a cafe there now that the public can use. I'm not sure if it's actually being used immediately now, but it was actually able to accommodate public. If not the general public, at least others from other ministries could go there and eat. What we want to have is that the people are more interactive with the Parliament. We understand that buses come up from various constituencies whenever there is a sit-in in the House, and they would have visual interaction with the proceedings. We expect that to continue, and not only to be a part of the internal workings of the Parliament, but also they can recreate outside. You can have a evening where you come down with your family
Yeah.
All right.
And you sit there and you have an ice cream and you can see the parliament and you're sitting on the steps if possible.
Okay, so this sounds far more inclusive and far more, I guess, socially aware than that I think people are originally thought, because the perception is that the Parliament building is just that building over there where the politicians meet, and if you have business over there, you happen to have business over there, you go over there. Otherwise, I don't need to be there.
Right.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of a business as usual approach to it, I think, and that's not what exactly we're looking for. I think the inverse of what Leighton is saying is one thing for the people to interact with the building. Quite frankly, I'd love to see a project that allows the members of Parliament to interact with the people. That you have this kind of open dialogue between the public and the government, and this engagement in a public space that is good for both, quite frankly. So I'm excited to see, and it goes back to your comment, Vaughn, about the youthfulness, because I think, if there's a young architect out there that's interested in going after this, and if they can team up or just have conceptual ideas, this is where we want to see
definitely
the future
that creativity,
shine.
right?
This is the moment to shine, and you may not ever get a chance like this again. And so I encourage all the professionals and the designers in the country to really take a close look at putting their ideas forth, because I think that's very important for the success of the project.
All right, Mr. Gill. I think persons might just to share a little bit of your expertise. Leighton had mentioned it before, just to talk about some of the projects that you've worked on, so persons can be, I guess, comfortable in terms of the breadth of experience that you bring to the competition. Can you talk to me about some of the buildings and some of the projects that you've been a part of?
Yeah. Well, let's see. It's been 25 years. Been very lucky in those 25 years. We have a practice in Chicago that we opened 12 years ago. We've been lucky enough to do, the world's tallest building. We've been lucky enough to do master plans for cities of up to 50 or 100,000 people that are under construction. We've designed net zero energy buildings. We've designed positive energy buildings. We're an international practice. Last year we had 51 buildings under construction around the world. This year we have 23. The Kazakhstan Expo in 2017 was completed with 28 buildings, one shot. So they tend to be large-scale projects, but we have planning, architecture. We are very concerned about carbon footprint. So we spend a lot of time looking at the sustainable aspects of our work. And, we've been very fortunate to have a practice that is able to function around the world with about 80 or so people in Chicago.
All right. Sounds impressive, to say the least.
Even though it sounds impressive, he has understated a lot of it.
Okay.
When he said the word tallest building, is actually a very iconic building in Dubai.
Yeah.
Which is very impressive.
Well, the first building, the current tallest building in the world is Burj Khalifa, which was designed by Adrian Smith prior to opening our firm. Since we've opened the firm, we've designed the next world's tallest building, which is the Jeddah Tower in Saudi Arabia, which is currently under construction. Over 1 kilometer in height.
All right. Suffice it to say, you are very well.
Get into the details.
You are very well qualified. Suffice it to say.
Thank you.
All right, Leighton. Just as an aside, can you provide perhaps a status report on the Government Circle project? What stage it is now, and where we're heading in that beyond the scope of the Houses of Parliament project itself, or the competition itself, rather.
All right. So the Government Circle, as you call it, is actually called Government Campus.
Okay.
Just for our viewership who may not be aware of what we're speaking of, the idea is that the Parliament, as well as the park itself, would be central to a campus, and this campus would have ministry buildings flanked around the park. So that's predominantly what the Government Campus project is all about. The idea is to have centralized government, which would be more efficient than what we currently have. So all the major ministries would be located in one area. That where we are now, we have done up an agreement with our unsolicited proposer. That is actually being considered at the moment, and the cabinet is making a decision on that. We're awaiting a decision. But where we are overall we are putting things in place to do feasibility studies to analyze more on ground what is happening in terms of social impacts, etc.
Can I just talk about that for a second?
Sure, go ahead.
If you don't mind. I think that one of the challenges of the project, frankly, is the context.
Mm.
And for a lot of the projects that we get as architects in terms of design briefs, when they define the site as X, it's really up to the architects and the planners, designers to really look at the context and look at the relationship to that site and determine what are the kind of connective tissues, scale, character, landscape, open space systems, vehicular systems, pedestrian systems that connect that context to that site. So on the one hand, while this is a building competition, we expect that anyone that would come to the table with a feasible idea would also have some inkling or some concept of the contextual relationships to this project, because they're fairly complicated, very rich, and offer tremendous opportunity. So, I think that there's this kind of beautiful combination of urban design and building design that's taken place here. And, the history is fantastic, and we're looking to use this project as a bridge to the future. So those kinds of moments are not to be seen, I think, as isolated from or distinct from the solution to the building.
Okay.
Because we all have to think of our cities as a whole, we have to think of our countries as a whole. So it's a much larger system, even though the result is the building.
You're right. Okay.
So just to add on that point, the competition is expecting to have someone, their team, actually moving towards completing a building, but we are asking in our brief and design that they will be looking at the entire park. So
as a entire
as
space.
the context, exactly.
Right.
So we expect our designers to prepare a solution that would look at how they would utilize the rest of the park, how they would utilize this park.
And not
with
necessarily in
ability.
detail, but just in terms of supporting the context of what their selection or idea for building placement is. It's like you would do any other building anyway.
Right. Which seems like that seems to be the position in architecture. You're designing the buildings to make sure that they work in harmony with the person. You don't just put down a building.
Precisely.
You
can't
make
just
sure it
import
works in harmony,
and
right?
float it in there and just leave it like that.
Right.
We want to understand what they're thinking about, the spaces and the relationships to the schools and the streets and the
approach and
how does it really work? What does it really look like? What does it feel like?
Especially for persons such as persons with disabilities and persons
Absolutely.
of other specialty groups or vulnerable groups and so on.
Exactly.
And also, as Jamaicans, we know that whenever Parliament opens, there is a procession, and a procession happens from the north and from the south. All of these considerations should be included in the design that is coming forward.
All right.
And that would dictate and determine how the entire landscape is ordered.
All right. Well, I think we've had a fairly comprehensive discussion about it. I think we've touched on everything. I think the competition, the terms, the rules, the regulations, what kind of things you should be looking for, how you should be conceptualizing it. Most importantly, that the persons involved should be Jamaican and registered with the. Remind me what's again the association.
The Architects Registration Board is the legal body that architects are registered. The GIA, which is the institute that the architects are a part of.
Right. And so the teams should have individuals registered with that body and be wholly Jamaican or very much Jamaican, so that the building or the design submitted reflects our Jamaican personality, reflects the people, and is in keeping with what we want as a people, what we want for our Parliament building. I think with all that said, I think it's always a good time for us to wrap. I believe you may have said everything that everybody needs to hear. I don't seem to have too many questions, but what typically happens is persons write their comments in the video below, And we will be going through and checking those questions. And if we have any that we might need to farm out to the UDC, I'm sure we can send them on to you guys and you can answer those and we can get back to
Can I just make one final point?
Sure, go right ahead.
All right, so we expect to have the public to be fully a part of this entire process. So the first stage, at the end of the first stage, we'll be having all the submissions on exhibit. At the end of the second stage, we'll also have the top 5 on exhibit. And we will also be having a People's Choice Award. So we expect that the public can vote on which design they believe should be the one to go forward to construction.
Okay.
So we will have the public fully engaged right throughout the process, and we'll be sharing all this information on May 17th at our launch.
But what if you find that the one that the judges like is not necessarily the one that the people like the most? What do you do in that kind of situation?
That happens all the time.
That happens all the time, but at least the public has a say.
Okay. And we want to know why.
Yeah.
You know, at least says the jury should take a look at that and understand what it is that the people find attractive about a certain scheme.
Yeah.
As opposed to having, all your friends come and vote for you. That's why you get
Of course. Of course. I think that's definitely a good moment for us to wrap.
Yes.
We have beside me Mr. Senior Project Manager at the UDC, Leighton Whyte, and beside him, Gordon Gill, patron of the Houses of Parliament Design Competition being put on by the UDC. We thank both of you for joining us. This has been a very fruitful discussion. I'm sure persons would have learned a whole lot and learned how to learn, I guess, more how the consideration that goes into planning a building and developing and architecture as a whole. I think this has been really enlightening. For me personally, I know that much now. I mean,
well, you can invite us to come back to have a discussion about architecture.
Yeah,
talk about Jamaican architecture.
Well, that is really, that's up to our audience. If the audience tells us that's what they want, they will do it. That's how we operate on this show. I mean, remember, our audience plays a major part in the show. If there's anyone that you want to see in studio, just let us know. We'll work as hard as possible to make sure we have them in studio as soon as possible. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, at Jamaica Information Service to see who will be in studio next. We do this every Thursday live on Facebook. I have been your host, Vaughn Davis. And, well, even though it's Monday, we do this mostly on Thursday. It's Monday. This was a special session. And we thank you for everyone who tuned in and watched along. We really appreciate it. Thank you for joining us. I have been your host, Vaughn Davis, as I've said. Thank you, and please have a good day.
Thank you.